Next item of business is a debate on motion 6143 in the name of Fiona Hyslop on Gaelic, an action plan for Gaelic. Rob Gibson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Falch down Cúnalach Úr na Gaelic. Welcome to the action plan to increase the numbers of Gaelic speakers. We have a very practical set of plans here at a time when we've recognised that the thrust of developing the number of Gaelic speakers will, of course, be through education and through the home and community early years right through to adult learning. That focus is excellent. I'm delighted that Arthur Cormack, in leading Bòrd na Gaelic, has homed in on these central parts of what has to be taken in order to try and increase the number of speakers. And at the present time, I think that it's to be welcomed that we do look at this at a time when the financial circumstances of belt tightening and so on are being placed as an obstacle to actually doing anything. And to argue against that, I think we've got the opportunity to say, you have to think about people's self-esteem, you have to think about individuals, communities, and indeed the country's self-esteem and identity. And if you're cutting away the basis of what it is to be the people who live in the particular areas where Gaelic still has heartlands, and indeed for the new learning communities, then you're making it more difficult for them in the future to have that distinctiveness that makes Scotland what it is. And Scotland, as a changing place, has nevertheless got those kinds of roots which Gaelic allows us to share with the rest of the world, and which is recognised more widely, for example, in the European Charter for Minority and Regional Languages as a language. I couldn't believe a presenter on BBC Scotland this morning who was saying, well, it isn't really a language, is it? You know, and one of the board's development officers saying, well, of course it is. And the problem we have is that out there, the appreciation of the language has got to be taken along with this effort to teach more people to become Gaelic speakers, because out there in the community there's a lot of misconceptions about what's going on here. I had the pleasure and sometimes the pain of taking part in a debate in Caithness about a couple of weeks ago on the place of Gaelic in that county, and it was a civilised affair which had been billed as though it was going to be a shooting gallery with those of us in the panel as the targets. But fortunately, despite the non-Gaels being polite, they did send some barbs in the direction of Gaelic. You know, it's a minority movement with the backing of a Gaelic Act. They are ramming it down our throats, said one of the panellists. Well, I don't think that's what the case is. The trouble is that when people don't have even the self-esteem to understand that their own dialect, the Caithness dialect, is a dialect of Scots, and that is something which will benefit from any debate about the other language, Gaelic, then we have to encourage people to recognise who they are, and that the diversity of languages in this country is something to celebrate and something that actually gives people a good feeling. And I think out of that debate means that the mod in Caithness in 2010, later this year, will in fact encompass not only Gaelic but also recognise that Norse heritage which comes through in the Caithness dialect of Scots. It's been mentioned earlier that we have the census coming round next year. We've been dealing with this in the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee, and indeed the language questions are there once again. The language question in Gaelic has been in the census for 100 years. I'm delighted that it is there, and we're hoping that this time we're going to be seeing a realistic picture of the number of Gaelic speakers, and in hope that it's going up. For the first time, however, in a way to bolster that, there's the question for the first time about the number of people who speak Scots. And as the convener of the cross-party group for Scots, I see the two of these languages together, supportive of the recognition that Scotland is a diverse place, and that indeed Gaelic and Scots have big parts to play in that self-esteem of our country as we move forward. And I would hope that if this debate does nothing else, it shows people out there who, in a very curmudgeonly way, say, why are we going to waste money on these past languages, which is what is said by some. I won't go into detail, but you know, it's an attitude which can fill newspaper pages of reactive attitudes against Gaelic, against Scots, then we must have a good argument that says why it's far better for people to be open-minded and to be welcoming. And it's interesting to see in the Sutherland Summit arguments that were made there about why Sutherland's an attractive place for people to come to. We've mentioned the scenery, the wildlife. Dave Thompson mentioned these. I think and other people recognise this. But German visitors saw the opportunity to see the language there in road signs, also on street signs, and indeed to hear it spoken. And that was one of the attractors to come there. Well, recognise that that diversity, that ability of people in Germany to recognise this could be much more widespread. So the Gaelic plan has the effect of allowing it to be possible for a lot more people to come to this country because they choose to see a living culture, not just the remnants of a dead one and something which you can find in the Fuorlarach and the piles of stones that used to be the houses in the villages that were cleared so long ago. So I'm delighted to support the action plan. I'm concerned that we make the argument for the money that's required to extend the schools. I'm also keen that the councils at the moment, where there's a large amount of Gaelic spoken, do not in any way stop recruiting Gaelic teachers at the moment, or water down the conditions under which they are recruited. And I am concerned, because of the cuts, that these things might happen. And I make a plea to council leaders, when they are thinking about these straitened times, that they make sure that Gaelic is not one of the victims unnecessarily of cuts at this time. So the Gaelic plan has a lot to do. It's a time of financial belt tightening, but it's a time of hope for this country. And I believe that that hope is encapsulated in plans such as the one that we are discussing today, and in a self-belief that in our variety of languages we are going to have a much more in-depth life of which is a life which has a good deal more depth to it and enjoyment for so many more of our citizens. And it's a language which we are arguing about as one of the family of languages in Scotland, but a language is a means to say so much more, and that's what we are here to underpin today.